The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 2, Seeds. The Boy. The big blue sky looked too cheerful for a day like today. The movers pulled up in front of his grandma's house and stopped. The 1,200-mile journey was over. Doodles slipped into the house invisible as his dad barked instructions to the men unloading the huge truck. His notebook and pencil firmly clutched in his hand, Doodles found an out-of-the-way place in the kitchen. The loud breathing in the living room was his first sign of his grandma. He stayed still and quiet, not wanting to be seen. She didn't run out to meet them like she normally did. She couldn't. About a week after his mother's accident, his mother's death, she slipped in the bathroom and broke her hip. She must be sleeping, he thought. Just as he opened his notebook, his dad's voice spoke in low, soothing tones in the living room. Doodles peeked around the corner and saw them together, his grandma and dad, in their quiet reunion. He looked back to the page and it spoke to him. "Come crunch the leaves with me. They won't be around much longer now that spring is here." The boy shook his head. He would never hear her voice again with his ears. It was silence forever. "She's gone," he reminded himself. "She's gone." And his own voice gone when her heart stopped. He hadn't spoken a word since her death. What words were there to say? He ran his hand over the next blank page, trying to take on its silence. Then his pencil moved over it, and the image of the old woman sitting in a dark room formed in his notebook. An urge to open the curtains came over him. An urge to let in some light, but he wasn't ready to be discovered. Not yet. His dad said something, too quietly for him to hear. "Oh, don't worry about him just now." His grandma's voice sounded scratchy and full of pain. "He'll have plenty of time to see me." "Well," his dad's voice grew louder now, "I just think he should at least come say hello." "He's been through a lot, honey. Let's not worry with it right now." "What about you? You've been through a lot." His dad growled, yet a touch of tenderness remained. "Honey, I've been going through a lot for a long time. You think this is anything new to your old mama?" She smiled and forced a laugh. Pain showed through the smile, but so did the kindness. A little bit of the sweetness that Doodles remembered came through. The hurt seemed to be from more than just the pain in her hip. He flipped a few pages to where he'd drawn his mother's eyes enjoying the sunshine. His heart ached, and he turned back to a new page. He hated the way the walls loomed around him. The air conditioning and the lights and all the ancient smells of the house made his lungs want to shrivel up. She was just too young. "I just can't stand it, son. I'm so sorry." Doodles didn't need to see his grandmother's tears to know that she was crying. He wanted to take her out of that dark room, to go crunch leaves with her. But there were only cedar trees around this house. The dead remnants of evergreens aren't as noisy as the leaves that had last known his mother's feet. "I just can't think about her being gone," his grandmother said, tears rolling down her wrinkled face. Her voice sounded strained with sorrow. "I know, Mama." Doodles sensed tension in his father's tone. His dad didn't cry, though. He hadn't seen his dad cry even once since what happened. "It's just," her tears came heavier for a minute, "it's just like the sun stopped shining." "How's a thing like that supposed to be?" she demanded from the darkness. Doodles didn't breathe. He wanted to open the curtains. He wanted to go hold her hand. He wanted to take her outside, dance with her. But his feet wouldn't move any more than his tongue would. Nothing moved but the blood in his veins, and he'd have stopped that if he could. "Mama." His dad started to say something, but the crashing sound in one of the bedrooms drew him away. "Can't you be more careful?" he roared, then stomped down the hallway. That box didn't come all this way just to get broken up right here inside the house. Doodles snatched up his notebook and walked toward the open front door. On his way out, the cool blue eyes in the dark pierced through him. Not a dangerous piercing, but one completely filled with love. He stepped into the living room. Without saying a word, he pulled the string alongside the curtains, letting in the light. His eyes locked with hers, and the tiniest of nods passed between them. His grandma's head flicked up toward the door. "Go on, baby. We'll see each other later." She smiled. For an instant, Doodles thought of running to her. He thought of letting out all of the tears that he'd been holding in, of cuddling into her softness. But he didn't. He heard his dad coming back down the hall and slouched out the door instead. Crisp springtime air filled his nostrils. The trees across the road swayed in the wind. It had been a few years since he'd walked out there with his grandma and mother. The woods looked abandoned and cold, even in the sprinkled sunlight. Tree Palace, his mom had called it. Doesn't look like much of a palace. They barely even look much like trees. The scrawny things weren't much more than bushes big enough for climbing. But if his mother saw a palace when she looked at them, there must be something more. Crossing the road, Doodles stepped into the woods, determined to find the secret of the name. Before he even got to the first tree, he'd taken out his pencil. Images of what would soon be on the page formed in his mind. He grasped his notebook, ready. The birds. A marvelous event will soon come to pass. Winsome smiled, looking upon his beloved. Gentle's eyes filled with tenderness, and her heart gushed. "The marvelous event is closer than you know, my only one." She tilted her head, too modest to say the words. "My dove," Winsome cried, hopping to her side. "Is it true? Will the little ones be here that quickly?" "Yes," she raised her head and chirped to the sky. "There is life within. I felt the stirring this very morn, so 'twill be only a few more new day shines. Soon we'll have 2 little beaks to nourish and 4 wings to train." How precious is this day! Winsome's wings fluttered. His feathers spread, stroking the air. "I awoke this morning with no knowledge of how bright the sun would shine upon us." He twittered along the branch in celebration. "Trees, flowers," he sang, surveying everything in his view. "Clouds, blue sky, sweet breezes." In his joy, only the air could hold him. His feet touched nothing but the sky near the nest where Gentle shifted on her eggs, yet soared in her heart. Winsome danced along the side of the nest, barely landing, then flitting away once more. "How precious," he sang. "How precious is this day." He leapt too close to the delicate platform of the nest. It trembled. "Hold your wings," Gentle laughed, balancing her place in the nest. "You dance like a thunderstorm. Look how much wobbling you've caused." Gentle's heart filled with love for her Winsome. With her wings, she cupped an egg further beneath her breast. Calming his flight, he looked upon the tender eyes of his dove. "Gentle," he whispered, "only your words and presence bring me such joy. Only your soothing voice can tame my restlessness." His legs were still, yet his heart beat fast in his chest, beat with pride and excitement. She dipped her head again, humbled by his utter affection. Feeling his gaze, she knew he dreamed of the weeks to follow, weeks that would be full of the search for food and many missteps along the branch to flight. She looked to the cedar sprigs beneath the tree, the soft spot where her fledglings would land before learning to fly. Her heart yearned to hear their songs, to see the changing shapes of their wings, to watch their feathers evolve from fuzz to mighty tools of flight. But now she sat in the sweet breeze, sharing silence with her dear one. Perched together, she and he quietly asked for the blessing of the sunlight to linger just a moment longer, a moment wrought of pure and golden light. Thank you for listening to The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.